Hello and welcome to Make It Happen with Will Polston. I'm Will Polston. This is episode number 126, and in this episode I'm joined by Patrick Henry. Patrick is the managing director of a number of different companies, including the multi-award winning estate agency Patrick Henry in London, Radiance London, which are luxury tanning salons, Reliance Design and Build, a residential and commercial building company with clients such as the NHS, Sushi Samba and more, and also Reliance Health, a medical installation and maintenance company. In this episode, we're going to be talking about walking the line of failure and principles for life. So Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So you and I, we were introduced by a mutual friend, Alex. So Alex, if you listen to this, hello. And what I think was quite interesting is that one of the things that I've strived to do for many, many years now is surround myself with like-minded people that have got a similar way of thinking, a similar mindset, that have got similar goals and ambitions. And we obviously had a conversation. Alex put us in contact, and I can kind of see why. And then I thought it'd be great to have you on the show. So thanks for coming along and getting stuck into things. So as we've just heard, there's quite a number of different things that you've done, various different businesses that you've started. And a lot of the people that listen to this show are aspiring business owners or have businesses. And you're someone with a lot of drive. You're someone that's achieved quite a lot at quite a young age. So I think it'd be really good for people to learn the way that you think and the reason why that you do some of the things that you do, because then people can look at taking those little nuggets. So for people that aren't aware, obviously we've just mentioned there's lots of different businesses that you're involved with, that you've built up and you've grown. But what was your earliest moment that you remember having a drive to want to be a success, quote unquote?
The earliest moment was coming out of university. I studied music production. I had a small recording studio, had a couple friends. It was okay, we were covering the bills and it was something we enjoyed to do, but I was working a lot of hours to pay those bills. And after I came out of university, I was quite disillusioned by the industry. We weren't really taught in our degree about the afterlife. So after passing out with your degree, what happens next? So I came out of university quite disillusioned by the whole thing. And I decided I need to be able to do something where I'm taking things into my own hands. The thought process was, my dad's getting old. His dad had Alzheimer's and dementia. My mum had looked after us all my life, me and my brother. And I didn't want her looking after me or me not being able to provide for myself. I wanted to be able to provide for her. And ultimately look after my father as he reached that stage, because care homes are expensive. If he was going to live with me, I need to have a house that's big enough, and I need to be able to provide at least financially. So to me, it was take on a job where my work is directly related to how much money I bring in. So if I'm really good at it, then I'll make money. If I'm not, I've got myself to blame for it. So it was actually either going to be estate agency or recruitment, because those were the two first jobs that came into mind when thinking about sales and commission. And so I went for estate agency because my uncle was in recruitment, did really well. I didn't want to be under his shadow, because it was a pretty big shadow. So straight into estate agency. Knew nothing about it, nothing about property. I mean, probably less than nothing. Probably what I thought was correct was actually incorrect. So I'm going to say that I started at minus and then worked my way up from there.
Okay, so this is interesting. So your drive coming out of uni. You've come out of uni. You had a recording studio because you studied music, right? That was your degree, and realized maybe this is harder than I thought it would be. But there was a drive and ambition to want to support your family that then led you to considering an alternative career path and obviously choosing estate agency, which, like you mentioned, for your reasons, was a lot of people would have followed in the footsteps of their family members. So they might have thought it was easy, but you actually kind of went with I don't want to sit under his sort of maybe. So what was the thought process? You get into estate agency and then what? Because now obviously you've got Patrick Henry estate agents and that's at an award-winning agency down in London. And at what point was it when you got into that you realized actually I'm quite good at this? Because you did pretty well pretty quickly. If I'm right in saying, was it Sunday Times you won like a Sunday Times award for the work that you did and things like that?
Yes. So to be honest with you, going into property, going to a estate agency, at the time I didn't think far beyond getting into property, which is a phrase I don't really like because it's so broad and multifaceted. So at the time it was get a job where I earn money based on my accomplishments. But when I got into the job and I did really well, all I really thought of in the first 2 years, I think I was working for other companies for maybe 3 years before I set up my own place, but I didn't think much far beyond, okay, as a top negotiator in London, pretty much capping out around 100 grand, unless you're in prime central London, 100 grand a year earnings. A top manager might be earning 250 or something like that. And to me, that was my mindset. Oh, I could be a manager of an office one day, or I could be maybe a director of a big company. It was only when I joined the second company and did really well there. So I knew it wasn't just fluke that I did it well in the first company. That was top negotiator in the company, the first company in the second full year of my employment. And then in the second company, I was top salesman after 9 months of employment. So not even a full year. And I banked more business than anywhere else. Actually, in the company's history, I banked more business in a year. And it wasn't until I actually thought about stopping doing a estate agency that the opportunity came up to open my own. So I was thinking about leaving a estate agency altogether because I was becoming a bit disillusioned with the whole thing. And I was thinking about opening up a business with my uncle and doing like a Jamaican or Caribbean version of Nando's, because my granddad's from Jamaica. So we had a thought process about, there's no real good chains of West Indian food. So why can't we take a piece of what Nando's has done, the style of quick and easy, but tasty, but have a Caribbean spin on it rather than a South African spin. So I was going to do that. And then all of a sudden the right shop came up and I thought, well, I can't really miss this opportunity. It's where I live. I know the area like the back of my hand. It seems perfect. So I ended up going back into it, or getting my mind back into being an estate agent, just because I thought, actually, do I hate doing a estate agency or do I hate working for other people?
Right.
And it was the latter. I didn't like working for someone else. I didn't agree with some of the principles. I didn't agree with some of the way that the business was run, basically, and the way that people can be as bosses, managers, and whatever else. I just didn't like it. So to me, it was like, actually, I do like estate agency. I love meeting people. I love sales. I love the thrill of it, and being part of the community as well. It's great for me, and that's probably why I still do estate agency now. It's not because it makes me the most amount of money out of all of my businesses. It's probably because I just enjoyed doing it.
Right. Okay.
It doesn't give me the freedom I need. I used to be in the office all the time, which kind of sucks sometimes. But when you're part of a community and when you're part of the infrastructure in a way, it gives me something that I haven't been able to find elsewhere. And I'm definitely not going to run to be a politician because I speak to clearly and open and truthfully about how I feel, which is probably going to get me in trouble one day. But there you go.
All good. So quick question then. So what was it, if you think back to, because obviously there's lots of people that are estate agents, but even when you first got into the industry, what was it that you did, in your opinion, that meant that you were as successful even when you were working in that role back then?
That's a good one. So I always describe it like this to people. I've met good negotiators that work really hard, and then there are really good negotiators that work really smart. All I did was do both. That's literally, there wasn't really a trick to it. I just saw, when I first joined in my agency, I saw different people, and every human's different, but even in a small office, in a small area where everyone's roughly the same age, similar-ish backgrounds, everyone approached the job differently. and I could see who was successful and who wasn't. And my thought process was, okay, that person's really good. Why are they really good? What are they doing? And then that person is really bad. Why are they so bad? And I kind of figured it out. And the people that were good to me, that really stuck in my head, were people that were smart with the things that they did. Because anyone can work hard if they really put their mind into it, but it doesn't mean they're working efficiently. Then you've got people that work really efficiently but don't work very hard, and it's like both of you are missing 20% here. And if they merge those two people together, then that's an incredible salesperson. And that's basically what I did. I just took the best bits from the best people, learned off them what they do, and then learned off the people that worked, basically the socks off to get it done.
You and I have shared a very similar blueprint for many years. So even from a very young age as a teenager, I remember just basically looking at the best people and going, right, well, I want to take their best bits and someone else's best bits and someone else's best bits, mix it with a blend of my own personality, and then I'll be a better version of me, and that's kind of what you did there. What are some examples of the sort of things that you did that was you working smarter? Because people get working harder, right? You dial more numbers. If you're in sales, you dial more numbers, you work more hours. But what are some examples of the things you did smarter?
Probably something that I picked up in a book called bollocks, what's it called? Bugger, I can't remember what it's called. I buy it for all of my new employees. I literally The Subtle Art of Persuasion. It's a book, can't remember who wrote it. It's got a fish hook and a strawberry on it. If you ever see the book cover, that's what it looks like for anyone else out there that wants to read it. Great book, really, really talks about sales and how sales is misunderstood and people don't apply sales techniques correctly, and gives you a lot of case studies about where people have gone wrong, whatever else. But one of the main things I picked up from the book was the idea of closing. So you can have a conversation with somebody, and that phone call conversation can either be really efficient or it can be completely open-ended and you can not actually deal with anything in the situation, in the conversation. So for example, you have a sale going through and you need for the buyer to do certain things, or you need for the vendor to do certain things, and you need to action certain things. What I would do at the end of the conversation is summarize the plan of action. So rather than, okay, great, yeah, we've discussed everything, put down the phone. At the end of the conversation, I would say, right, I'm going to do this, and that will have this effect. You're going to do this, and that will have that effect, and that will mean that we get to this conclusion. So I'm telling them, you have to do this. I am going to do this. So this is happening, but I need you to do it. That's closing down that certain scenario, that certain conversation, to get an effect from it, to make sure that person actually can do what you need them to do, rather than maybe suggesting something. Oh, if you do call your solicitor, then maybe we can get this moved forward. At the end of the conversation, I'll be like, okay, so you're going to call your solicitor, you're going to say this to them, and then I'm going to call the vendor and I'm going to say this to them and make him speak to his solicitor or her solicitor, and then we'll be able to bring the sale to a successful close. And that, probably a better example of it is when you someone makes an offer and you talk to the owner of a property about it, rather than saying, here's the offer, what do you think? And then the owner goes, yeah, that's not going to work for me. No, see what else. Let's see what else they're willing to offer, or what else they're willing to do to make the offer better. Rather than just going back with an open-ended, sorry, it's not going to work for the owner, I would just do what's called, I think it's ABC close. So if I get the buyer, the tenant rather, to move in a week earlier, if they offer £1,800 a month rather than £1,750, and if they don't make you provide a bed for the property, they bring their own bed, would you then accept their offer? Yes. Okay. So now I know if I go to the buyer, I've got a tenant, I have to get these 3 things crossed off, and I know the owner's going to say yes. What people normally do is go, oh, you said no, then call the tenant and be like, sorry, it's a no. And the tenant will be like, well, what do they want? Oh, I don't know, but if you improve the offer, maybe, and then it goes back and forth, rather than closing down every call to maximize it.
Yeah.
And that would save me, I don't know, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. which doesn't sound like much, but if I'm off the phone for those 2-3 minutes, I could be meeting a new buyer. I could be meeting a new owner of a property or discussing something else that's more important.
Yeah.
So that would be a big thing for me, is just basic closing. And that's what I talk to my new staff about all the time. Closing is probably one of the most efficient ways of maximizing your time, because you don't leave things open-ended. You have a conclusion in every conversation, which ultimately saves you time. And people think of time saving as something that's quite linear. And, it's just like, I've saved a bit of time, saved a bit of time, saved a bit of time. But if you don't close down conversations, the level of effort you need to put into subsequent conversations actually goes up, because there are more things to deal with, and then it becomes elongated, and it's even more difficult to finally bring it to a conclusion. But I think that's one of the main things.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with you in terms of what my interpretation of that is, that you stayed focused on your outcome. Your outcome was you wanted it to be done, and you wanted it to be done as efficiently and effectively as possible. And the compound effect of all of those, like you say, the compound effect of not having to make those extra phone calls, and the compound effect of having all of those extra 2 or 3 minutes all add up over the medium long term. So now, obviously, quite a number of years later since then, the business empire has flourished. So you've got obviously Patrick Henry, your estate agent brand. You've got Radiance London, which are luxury tanning salons. You've got Radiance Design and Build, which is a residential and commercial building company with clients like the NHS, Sushi Samba, and others. You've got Radiance Health, which is a medical installation company and maintenance company. So the business empire is growing now. But what I want to know is that a lot of people, they think that success is linear. You talk about linear, like it just keeps getting better and better and better. But I know that it's not the case, and that there's some scary moments, and there's the oh shit moments, when it's like, oh, are we going to get through this? And no doubt some failures along the way. So what have been some failures, and what have been your really scary moments? How did you get through them?
I've had so many scary moments, and so many close to the mark moments. I've probably even had moments where it's actually come to a stop, and I've had to revitalize the whole situation, or bring it back to life. So if we're talking about estate agency, let's start the estate agency, Patrick Henry. So one of the big ones was Brexit. In London, Brexit was humongous. I personally had a property that I finished developing on the day of the referendum. So my thought process was, wait for the referendum to be done and then put the property on the market, because there's no point, I might as well wait another day. And then I woke up on the day that after the results and checked my phone and was like, oh shit, I just lost 200 grand. Like everything was going all over the place. Stock market was tumbling. Everyone was talking about the world ending. And I was sitting there with an empty 4-5 bedroom house, which I've just done up to the 9, spent a load of money on, and I'm pretty much sure I just lost 200 grand. That was bad. That was hard. But there was nothing I could do about the situation. Fortunately, I factored in an element of risk into my calculations anyway. So the market dropping that much didn't actually mean I lost money. I broke even pretty much. With the estate agency, when Brexit happened, almost every sale fell out of bed, because buyers were saying, well, the stock market has dropped 20%, so that must mean the property market's dropped 20%. I don't know how they formed that conclusion, but that's what they said. People were saying to me on the phone. And then we had a big issue with sale properties coming onto the market, because we had to reevaluate how much they're actually worth now, because there was actual effect. It's probably more like 10% rather than 20, but there was that effect. And because London is so pro-EU, it meant that regardless of the actual economic effects, because nothing had actually happened, regardless of the fact that nothing had actually happened apart from a referendum result, that the effect already felt throughout the sales market. And it meant going back to owners of properties and said, look, I know you want to list your property at 500,000, for example, but we're probably going to have to bring it down to maybe 450, 475. Now, if you say that to somebody, regardless of whether they're a rich Londoner or not, that's a lot of money. And they start reevaluating what they're going to do. They might hold out, they might not put it on at all. And that means that our stock levels went from how many properties to maybe a quarter of what it was. And the sales that we did have go through, so the pipeline of sales that you pretty much rely on, that was decimated, absolutely decimated. And I had to basically restructure everything that I was doing in the business. So I went from a very heavily sales focused approach to a state agency to a pretty heavy lettings approach, which meant going out there and trying to get as many lettings properties on my books as I can, especially properties that are managed, where instead of taking a fee up front every year, I would take a little bit of money every month, because my thought process was, we're going from feast to famine, and it happens every 5 or so years in the property market. I mean, 10 years, something dramatic happens, 10 or 15 years now, something dramatic happens, but every 5 years, something happens. And I wanted to insulate myself from that. So to do that, I built up a management portfolio, so that I had a constant flow of money coming in. So I never woke up in the morning and thought, if I don't get this sale through, the company's done. Like right now, if I don't open up my doors for a month, I guess we kind of did that during lockdown, but if I don't open my doors for a month, I'm not losing the company. The company's going to run smoothly. And that was a big turning point for me, because for me, all I was thinking was get the sales in, get the money in, constantly ding, 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 ring the bell. I thought, actually, stability is more important. One, mental health is important. So not waking up every day thinking, am I going to go bankrupt today or not? But secondly, it actually makes you operate better, because you start thinking about long term, and you're thinking about building things up, and it's more in your control rather than this up and down, left and right, whatever else is going on scenario. So that was the big thing with the estate agency. With the tanning shops, we opened them 2 months after the Brexit referendum. All the sunbeds came from Poland. Poland is in the EU. And as the pound plummeted, it meant that the price for the sunbeds skyrocketed, which meant that the cost for the finance on them, because they're pretty expensive machines, they're like 30 grand for one of the best ones, 10 grand for like the cheapest one, and we had 6. What that meant is the overheads went up dramatically, and the finance is not cheap. But when you open a new company, finance on things like machinery could be like as close as 20% per annum. And that was very scary, because we were about to open our doors. We signed a brand new lease on the premises. We just kitted the place out, spent loads of money, and it was borderline unaffordable what we were having to pay for the sunbeds. And we'd already signed the agreement. So it was very, very difficult. And we got to a point when an electricity bill came in, and we didn't pay it because we couldn't afford to pay it. And then the debt collection company came out to the salon and was like, if you don't pay, I think it was like 4 grand, something like that. As you can imagine, we use a lot of electricity in the salons. And he said, if you don't pay this today, then I'm literally going to shut your shop. And I was like, oh, well, that's a problem. So I had to go and sell my body on Clapham Common. I didn't get much for it. No, I had to scramble around to find this money. Obviously, I talked to him as politely as I possibly could, and we came to an agreement where I gave him a chunk up front, and then he came back a month later. I was really looking forward to him coming back, gigantic man that he was. But yeah, we almost lost the company then. With Reliance Design and Build and the medical side, that's basically under one umbrella. So Reliance Incorporated is the parent company. Reliance Design and Build and Health are the 2 arms of the company. When the pandemic hit, it sucked. We had to stop working, basically, because nobody wanted you in their houses, even though apparently building works could continue. Most of our properties were residential, and people were living in their houses, and they didn't want 4 or 5 guys in their property possibly spreading around a virus. So we had to stop work for a long time. And then when it did come back, it came back very slowly. This time last year, we had 1 project on the go, and 1 project on the go is nowhere near enough to sustain the staff levels, just the cash flow in general that we needed. And then the fluctuation of commodities, so steel went through the roof, plasterboard, you couldn't get hold of plasterboard. All of those things compounded until it was maybe August last year where it was very touch and go, very, very, very touch and go. So much so that when I looked at the numbers, I couldn't see a way out of it. I don't know if you ever had that moment where you can't process everything and your head goes into like a bubble and it's like you're floating. Like, I can't actually process what's going on. There's so much stuff going on, so many issues. I don't know if we're broke or if we're doing okay, because I'm gonna have to process all of this. And it was almost like a meltdown in my head, where I was trying to understand what was going on. So that was very difficult. On the medical side, which is the same company, the NHS basically cancelled a lot of projects when the pandemic struck. They weren't caring about upgrading things. They weren't caring about a lot of maintenance, actually. They were focusing on getting ventilators up and ready. So the Excel Center, turning that into essentially I don't even know how to describe it. The amount of beds and ventilators they had in there was insane, but all of the projects were going towards these new coronavirus focused projects, and they don't use smaller companies for those projects. They get the big companies in because there's almost like a guarantee of it happening. Okay, it might cost them 10-15% more, but they don't care. They're just like, look, get us X amount of this and X amount of that, scrap the old projects, which was basically our pipeline and our cash flow, and give all these projects to the big boys, which is understandable because everyone's panicking and rushing. You don't want to go for someone that's only been established for a year and a half. You want to go for someone that's well versed in the process to minimize any risks. And so that was very, very difficult, because not only were we losing money because the projects weren't going on, but it also meant that we were being taken out of the industry. And the industry is very tight knit, I'm going to say, because I don't want to say cronius, but you've got to know people, you've got to know the industry, you've got to know what's going on, you've got to be involved to be in the conversation. You get taken out of the conversation, you got to build it up again. You know, it took us like 9 months to get one of our first products. And after that 9 months and a year and a half, maybe, we just had everything taken away. That could mean that people forget the name Reliance Health. And it could mean that those relationships that we've built don't come back together again because, you know, they found other people, or they're working on bigger projects, or maybe they're hiring more people because they don't want to subcontract work out to us. So yeah, those are pretty much the main turning points in all of the companies. And yeah, it really sucked.
You've pushed on through, and one of the reasons that you pushed on through, I know you're quite big on sort of having a philosophy of life and having principles. What are some of those key principles that you live by?
One of them is either everything matters or nothing matters. So I don't like it when people say, "Oh, it doesn't matter, don't worry about it," or you know, you're trying to get an answer on something, or you're trying to, or something goes wrong, and then someone says, "Oh, don't worry about it." I'm like, no, let's worry about it. Let's think about it. If something goes wrong, why is it going wrong? How do we make sure it doesn't go wrong again? And how do we, you know, become better from it? So to me, everything does matter. Your successes matter, your failures matter, changes that you make matter, even staying the same, do nothing, that matters, because you're making a conscious decision to be static. And as much as that might be comfortable to you to stay static, that you have to know that that's probably to your detriment. If you don't move on, you're going to get left behind. But that might be comfortable for you, so you might want to go ahead and do that. So to me, everything matters. Whatever the decision is, whatever the outcome is, it all matters. So that's one thing that's very broad. It's particularly business related. I think you should people should take that on board with everything that they do. It could be relationships. You know, every time I do this happens. Okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, well, maybe it does, and maybe it does matter. Maybe it doesn't matter right this second, because it's only the second time that you've gone out with your mates and got pissed and haven't talked to your missus, and she's upset about it. You know, she'll get over it. Yeah, maybe this time, maybe the next, is it going to happen the third time? Are you going to break down because of it? Maybe it does matter. So yeah, that's probably one of my biggest principles. The second is there's no shame in doing well. There's no shame in succeeding, as long as you don't hurt anyone along the way. I'm probably, I would say one of the reasons why I'm not more successful than I am is because I won't do certain things. I won't lie to people to get their money. I won't effectively cheat people out of money to get where I want to get to. And I won't do things that morally don't seem right to me. For example, I've had clients in the past that have been like throwing around the word racist and homophobic and whatever else without having definite proof of it. But they've definitely said things that would make me think they're racist or homophobic, and I've refused to do business with them. For example, I won't have such a person in my rent a property from me. And then I'll turn around and go, well, then you probably don't want me doing the letting of the property for you, because this is what I think about the situation. Like somebody said, I don't want a black person in property, which I've been told for. Then I would, at that time, I replied to the person, well, you probably don't want someone whose grandfather's black to let your property. And I think that response was, well, yeah, probably wouldn't. I was like, well, that's me. So this isn't going to work, is it? So I'd rather not take money. My first boss used to say something which is slightly off topic, but it's really good what she said. When you've got a client that you don't like, we've all got clients that we can't get on with, or we think they're irrational or whatever else. She goes, take their money, make the sale, and then go and buy yourself something nice for putting up with them, and be proud of yourself for not losing your cool and whatever else. Like, she wasn't talking about racist and homophobic people and bigoted people. She's just talking about arses, basically, with a real pain to deal with. And you can't figure out why they're so difficult and hard to work with. So just treat yourself to something nice at the end of it. I don't know why I brought that up, but that stuck in my head. And now I literally do that. Every time some really difficult sale goes through and I bit my tongue all the way through, I'm like, yeah, you deserve something to say congratulations for getting through that. So, and then next time you think of that person, you're just going to think, yeah, well, this watch is because of you, thanks for that, cheers.
And what would you say a third would be?
I've actually got my principles written down on my phone, but that'll be boring if I have to look at my phone to tell you what they are. My probably the biggest one is something I did a video on yesterday, funny enough, which is everything is on me. Everything that happens, everything that goes wrong, every hurdle that is stumbled over rather than leapt over, that's all on me, especially when it comes to my businesses. But in general, I think it's a good principle to have, to look at what you're doing as though you have complete control. So let's take it from a business point of view. The example I gave was, if one of my colleagues, when I say colleague, I mean literally employee, but I don't like using employee. Like, I don't like being called boss, and never let that happen unless it's a joke. So one of the examples I give is, if a colleague of mine does something wrong, instead of getting mad at them and saying, oh, you should have done this and this, and that's pointless. That's absolutely pointless to get mad at someone that you have hired and you have trained, because that never would have happened if, well, first of all, if you didn't employ them. Second of all, if you trained them better. Unless they're being malicious and they're actually, and I don't know, there's some sort of actor that can get around your interviewing techniques, and then maybe you can say, okay, you were duped into it. But generally speaking, when stuff goes wrong, it's because of a process that you've put in place, it's because of training that you put in place, or the person that you've hired. So the idea of kicking your toys out of the pram and shouting at someone, one, is counterproductive. That person's just going to think you're a douchebag. And second is, you're not actually improving anything. Because if you fire that person, just like, oh, you're useless, get out of here, and then you hire someone else, you're going to follow exactly the same protocols to hire that person, and then you're going to train them in exactly the same way. And then what's to stop you from shouting at them the next time? Much better to go, okay, what could I have done better here, rather than shouting and screaming.
Yeah, I think that principle of taking personal responsibility is huge. And when people adopt that, their whole world can change, because then they can go from being the victim to the victor. They can go from being powerless to powerful, because yes, it may not be their fault, but it is their responsibility to take responsibility, and then they can do things about it moving forward. So yeah, I completely agree with you in that respect. 100%. 100%.
Yeah. I'd rather be a weak loser, to be honest with you. I'd rather fail continuously and know that it's on me, because that means I'm in control. I have the power to change it or to suffer it. And some people do enjoy suffering. This is what I've come to realize, is the amount of people that I've spoken to about relationships, about work, about starting up their own business, whatever it is. And by the end of it, you've come to a conclusion, and you've just figured out a way to alleviate some of the pains and stress and whatever else. And then they just go back to doing the same thing. Now, to me, that's either you're actually comfortable with this level of pain, maybe you're comfortable with that level of pain, or B, you just don't think that you have the power to change things. If you think you've got the power to change it, you can focus on, okay, I'm okay with this. Maybe your girlfriend snores and you're sleep deprived because of it. I can change that, but I don't want to lose her, so I'm just going to move into another bed or something like that. Whereas a lot of people would suffer through it and not make any changes, as though to make a change would be to their detriment, or if something changes, then the world ends for them, or their world ends, because they can't envision something other than where they are at that time. And vision's a big thing. Vision's a very big thing for people to get in their heads, to be able to visualize what things can be like if they make changes, and visualize where they want to be, or who they would like to be. And I don't think enough people spend time thinking about that, about their vision for themselves and their future. And yeah, I think that's a huge detriment to people.
Very true indeed. Very few people would just get in a car and go for a drive, not knowing where they wanted to go. Yeah, many people drive the vehicle of their life, i.e. themselves, without knowing the destination. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for your time. It's been really insightful hearing your insights, your journeys, what's been going on, and some of your principles for life that enable you to strive and do what you've done. So thank you very much. It's been great having you on the show.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Guys, I hope you found this beneficial. And if people want to connect with you, where can they find you, Patrick?
So my Instagram is Patrick Henry Property. I believe that my Twitter is the same, although I seldom use it. Probably Instagram is the best way to check out what I'm doing.
Sounds good. So guys, if you've been intrigued by Patrick and what he's up to, then definitely go and connect with him. And until next time, make it happen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.